Touch is the story of four childhood best friends whose lives are interrupted by a pandemic and then strung out through a series of challenges that they must overcome to ultimately attempt to regain their childhood while the clock is also running out. The story follows the main character, Travis, and a young woman who he is just at the very beginning of the story experienced his first hint of love toward. They share a moment just before a pandemic strikes and everybody finds themselves in isolation. Travis's father is a software engineer, and when he's not at work or hanging out with the family, he is a open source spy, if you will. He's a bit of a hacker. He's done some things that if the government knew about, he would probably go to jail, but he's doing it all for the good of humanity. And as that person, Travis's father, discovers that this pandemic is actually worse than the government's reporting. The government has basically said this thing is so bad, if we tell the public right now before we're ready to deal with it, there'll be mass panic and we'll lose control, blah, blah, blah. And so they're covering it up. Not covering it up, but not revealing they're covering up the reality of how bad it is as they prepare to deal with it. But Travis's father, Kent, has figured out on his spy network that this is happening and comes to believe that it is in fact true and forces his family into quarantine. But because he's a spy, he can't necessarily use this information to help everybody else, all their friends and such, because that could blow his cover as a spy. So the children are left in this odd situation of their father feels like this thing's really bad. The mother agrees because she knows what he's doing and why he believes this, but they can't tell their friends, and everybody else, and the news included, is reporting it differently. And so it kind of starts this weird story of distrust going a lot of different directions, and ultimately Travis coming to the conclusion that in order to reclaim their childhood in the face of the uncertainty of how long this virus might keep them separated, they need to find a way to quickly and efficiently detect the virus so that people who don't have it can hang out, meaning they and their friends. People that do can, of course, quarantine and they can get it under control. A little inspiration from COVID, right? The idea that you can have it and be contagious before you're symptomatic, and that's why it's so dangerous. But this is a much more deadly disease than COVID ever was, but the government is covering that up. So ultimately, there's 4 seasons to this story, and the first season is all about figuring out how to detect the virus. Ultimately, they figure out this magical accident happens, and they discover this way to detect the virus. But while the children are essentially figuring this out, Travis has gotten incredibly sick, and for reasons that are part of the story, Travis and Sage are very, very special to being able to, they're actually part of the solution for detecting the virus because they're tetrachromats. They can see a frequency of light that other people can't, or at least not very many other people can. And Travis ends up falling sick at the end of season 1 because of it's actually not because of the virus, but everybody fears that it is and forces him into quarantine, but it's actually because of overexhaustion and isolation and depression, and all those things are piling up, and he's actually doing really, really badly. And so season 1 kind of ends with Sage, his dear friend and the one that he's now starting to feel some sparks for, making the decision because she knows what's happening when nobody else will believe her, to risk her life to save Travis's and use this magical solution that only she and Travis can see to prove that Travis does in fact not have the virus. Meanwhile, Kent is on this trail because he's picked up on this evidence that seems to suggest not only that someone has found a way to rapidly detect the virus, but that there is this organization called Ralteman Industries that is a little too curious about finding this person. And Kent puts some pieces together and realizes that this organization is wanting to shut it down because they want their solution to the virus to be the only one that anybody can get. Anyway, it all comes to a head at the end of season 1 when Kent comes home from having to go do some actual hard. There's this idea of agents and analysts. He's worked as an analyst most of the time, just processing data that other people have collected. They're called whispers, kind of collecting these little things on the internet, suggestions of possible cover-ups and such. But the agents are the ones that go and ruffle through the garbage and break into places and do things that could get them in trouble, right? And he has previously sworn off this lifestyle because his wife doesn't want him to get in trouble. But he does have a bit of a record that he needs to not get caught for. But because of his concern that this organization is shutting down this thing that's so critical that humanity get, he makes the decision to become an agent again and goes out off the wire to try and find this organization. Or actually, not the organization, but to find whoever it is that found the solution and make sure that they're safe, because there's no way they could possibly know that they're in danger of being caught by Ralteman Industries. And it's while he's gone that Travis falls sick. So this all happens, and it kind of all comes together when Kent puts together enough pieces to realize that the source of this information is actually back home. He doesn't know it's his kids, but he knows it's someone in that area, mapping IP addresses or something. He knows it's someone right in that area. And it's actually not his kids, but his kids' friends that are the ones that put this out on the internet. So he comes back home right at the time that Sage is also proving that Travis isn't really sick, and they all come together, and their secrets get revealed, and they discover also that Ralteman is trying to shut them down. The kids do. And so that takes us to season 2, which is all this cat and mouse kind of deal, where the children, along with their parents, not always in alignment, but they're trying to figure out how do you get this solution to the world. Kent has some issues around his history, so he can't necessarily go straight to the government. There's also a lot of distrust there because of the lies that had been told initially. By now, the government's come clean. Everybody knows that this virus is really bad. But the kids have to figure out, who can you trust? Who do you give this information to so that the world will get it? And how do we do that before this organization that's trying to stop us gets to us, who's trying to discredit us and ultimately stop us because they're out for money? And in the end, they figure out a way. I haven't figured out what that way is, but they figure out a trusted way to get that out there. Maybe it's a news organization or something. I don't know. I haven't figured that out yet. But they figure out how to get it out there, and they give the solution to that source. But as part of having to make the space for the kids to deliver the goods, Kent has to play interference, and Ralteman ends up capturing him and holding him hostage. And so after delivering the solution to this thing, Ralteman basically says, if you continue to help or this gets out, you're not getting your daddy back. So it turns into a very different show. I don't know if it's very different, but it's different. To me, it's like a hostage story almost, negotiations. I don't know, for season 3. And in season 3, Kent is being held hostage. Now Travis has got to figure out how to get his daddy back, and also realizing that he's only released half of the solution. Nobody's able to actually use the information that they released to figure out the virus. And Ralteman's saying, if you give him the last piece, never seen your daddy, so what do? Like, you need to get the information of the world, but you don't want to lose your dad. The government's also gotten queued off and is after Kent as well, so there's that. Ultimately, Travis and Sage discover that not only is tetrachromacy an important part of what enables them to be the key to making this virus detection work, but apparently there's something special about them beyond that. I haven't figured out exactly what this is, but the idea is that the solution is some muck from a pond exposed to this virus emits light that only they can see. Ultraviolet, for tetrachromacy, but something's different about them, and I think that something different is that up above this pond is an old landfill, and there's some kind of chemicals in the water. We're going a little bit of the superhero origin story, maybe a little bit. I don't want to go too far that route, but there's something about them because they've been drinking this water in the pond, that because it's been filled by this water, that they come to realize in season 3, when they decide to go ahead and hand over the information and say, you know what, it's tetrachromacy, look in the right frequencies, and Ralteman discovers that, oh my goodness, this isn't working. They've lied to us. Well, no, they didn't lie. They just didn't realize they were special. That Sage and Travis realize, in fact, that they are the key. Their advantage over Ralteman is that there are 2 keys, and Ralteman doesn't know that. So there's a play at the end where Travis decides to give himself up in order to satisfy their needs of experimenting on him, I guess, to find out what he has, in exchange for his father gets released, while simultaneously Sage delivers the other key to the rest of the world. Something like that. Anyway, long story short, Kent gets saved. The tech is released to the world, which begins to heal it, and Ralteman's secret of... I forgot. Ralteman has a secret. So Ralteman is, interestingly... actually the reason why this whole thing happened. They have developed this AI model to anticipate the challenges in the pharma space that the world might face. And one of the biggest threats that their AI system has determined there is to humanity is a virus that moves so quickly and is so deadly that humanity can't develop a solution to it before they're, mostly wiped out. And the AI's solution to this is engineer a virus that you already have a solution to, release that into the public. Yes, some people will die, but for the greater good, humanity will realize their vulnerability. And not only that, they will realize Ralteman has the solution, comes up with the solution, and Ralteman can make a bunch of money off of it, which puts them in a position to be able to be prepared to R&D for that unexpected non-engineered virus that may someday hit. That's my idea. So they're doing a bad thing for good reasons, and they're blaming it on AI. And in season 3, Kent is the one who realizes what's really going down. And so season 3 ends with that information. Now they've got Kent back, but Kent knows what happened. And season 4 is kind of this things are kind of back to a steady state, except that now we have inside information on Ralteman. We know what they're doing, and we know why they did it, and we know they're going to do it again. And so Travis is kind of confronted with this, like, do I go back to my normal life and hope everything's okay, even though Ralteman might do this, or do I try to do something about Ralteman? Why not Kent? Well, Kent is pretty broken from his experience being held in captivity and mistreated. Travis is also 3 years older now. He's practically a man. Very young man, but he's grown up, and the children decide that they are going to chase this. Travis decides that he's going to chase this, and you may notice my story's getting fuzzier as I go, because it is. Travis ultimately decides to go get them. They come up with a strategy for how to catch these guys and expose them and all that good stuff. Of course, the parents don't really want them to do it because it's highly risky, and they ultimately say no to the plan that the children have for how to do this. Well, Travis ultimately decides to do it, even though everybody thinks he's not going to, trusting that once they realize he's begun executing their plan, that they will jump in and join him as the only good solution to possibly save him. And it all leads up to a showdown where Travis discovers that not only is there an AI, but there actually is a bad actor inside the organization, a person or maybe a small core of people who were manipulating things to be this way for truly nefarious reasons. And Travis is able to shut down that operation inside of Ralteman, essentially solving the problem. but he's faced at the end with this decision: do I go after these bad guys and make sure that justice is served? But in order to do so, he's going to he's going to have to, he's risking his life, he's risking his well-being. Maybe he's going to have to live in hiding for the rest of his life. I don't know what that exactly is, but there's some reason why that choice to continue on jeopardizes his ability to have a normal life, and certainly jeopardizes his ability to ever have a relationship with Sage in any kind of normal world setting. Or he can let them go, knowing that Ralteman, the fundamental issue has been solved, even though justice hasn't been served. He can be with Sage, but now he has to live with the fact that these guys never got punished. In the end, Travis chooses Sage, which of course means a lot to Sage. And the romance never really plays out on screen. I think it's implied that their story ends 4 years later, and this saga of everything ends, and now they get to be kids again, even though their childhoods are largely behind them, and they get to make decisions like normal people, and they have the chance to be in a relationship if that's what they choose. But I think that's just implied that is what they choose, but we don't go into that story. Yeah, I think that's kind of an overview of what touches right now. Last week, or no, I guess it was this week, talking to Jefferson and Darce, I realized that this is largely my idea, and we'd done this exercise of writing together, and then we did it again. A friend of mine, Heidi, came and joined. We wrote some for a story she's been working on, and I've just been really excited about what comes out when you bring a bunch of people in and you just like start writing a script together, because nobody can anticipate where it's going to go, and the stuff that comes out it's not like, oh wow, this is ready to be published. But it's rich with interesting ideas that you could then polish off, and I've just been really delighted by the ideas that come out of that process. And so last Wednesday, I said to Darce and Jefferson, guys, push me, like bring your piece. What would make this story fascinating to you too? And so we've decided our next Wednesday we're going to just kind of brainstorm. And I don't know, the story I just told, that's my story. That's what I'm thinking right now. Yeah, it'll change as I work on it, but I've gone a step further and I said, hey, I want you guys to help me figure it out too. Like, let's come up with something that's just really fun, that captures the essence of it. And what is the essence? This story was originally inspired by my childhood disaster fantasies that, yes, included a touch of romance, and the pandemic. Pandemic being kind of this global disaster. So that's a nice context for my disaster fantasies, right? So I spent a little time thinking about what is it? What are the things that really powered my childhood fantasies? And those are the things I want. Those are the emotional building blocks of the story I want to tell here. So I'd love to see that get infused a bit more. And I think, the list that I made are these. Perseverance against all odds. I want my story to look like that. I think I've got that in here now. Loyalty. Not in the macro story, maybe. I don't know. I guess there's loyalty shown when the family rallies, both families, the children and their parents, rally behind Travis in the end there when he makes his play against their advice. They rally behind him. So I guess we kind of have that. Doing the right thing. I think that as an interesting thing that I explore here, I think frequently they're choosing to do things that are risky because they believe that they can contribute something to the greater good. I think that in the end, Travis makes an interesting do the right thing choice when he lets the bad guys go, in order to actually focus on the relationships that matter to him. And I actually think that that's the right thing, although it's a really hard right thing. Outsmarting the enemy. I think that whole Sage and Travis are the keys, and Ralteman doesn't know there too. There's some fun outsmarting the enemy that goes into that, where it looks like he's losing. Looks like the kids are losing when in fact they're winning. So that's an element. I don't need that exact story to happen, but That's how I've respected outsmarting the enemy. Good fortune. I think that's really exemplified by the accident early on, and that's kind of the major plot point where they discover this pond muck thing. It's actually a fit of rage, not rage, just annoyed sibling rivalry. Some throwing of pond muck while somebody's holding a vial of a virus, and that's how they discover this solution. None of their actual attempts work, but this accident. Travis sees a light and goes, "Holy cow! There's a solution here." So that's kind of fun. The good fortune piece I really like. I feel like more modern film doesn't have a lot of that sometimes. A lot more focus on things going bad. Winning in the end, I think that's true. Although it's a bit of bittersweet win. I think ultimately it's a win in the end, and there's lots of intermediate wins in the end, which I very much so love. Another value I have is perseverance and love. I guess this could probably go under loyalty, but to the people that you love, whether it's this romantic relationship that has budded between Travis and Sage, or just familial love between Travis and his sister, or Sage and Walker, or the parents and kids, like that is really important to me. But I guess maybe by perseverance and love, I'm thinking specifically, if you're really into that person, like you will hold out for them. I think Sage demonstrates that when she risks her life. Actually, that's something I forgot. There's this concept of you can catch this thing twice, and it's way more deadly the second time you get it. Turns out, I guess, Raltman engineered it that way with the expectation that not many people would get it the second time. Because I don't think they were trying to kill a lot of people, but maybe the bad guys were. I don't know. I haven't figured all that out. But yeah, she takes a risk, and she knows she's taking a risk, but because of her affection and love for Travis, she's willing to take that risk. And of course that pays off. So that's exemplifying perseverance and love. Another one, in the end, requited love. I don't know if that's in the story here. Not in the macro scale. I don't think it's unrequited throughout the entire story until the end. I think there may be some awkwardness of where they're not quite ready. My guess is it gets resolved in season 1 if it's unrequited for a time. I think they both feel it. It's just the awkward, not sure they're, down for it kind of thing, ready for it. I don't know. And then here's an interesting one. Depending on secret tribal knowledge. This is something from my childhood. The George family, right? We had things that we shared knowledge about, and we would actually sometimes practice depending on that secret shared knowledge that nobody else knew, so we could essentially do things or handle situations by subtly communicating. I think that's fun, and I would love to see that. I think that'll be more down in the details, although there's probably some larger themes that need to. Well, it's probably not so much the themes. It's probably more that you have to set up for them ahead of time so that you know why that knowledge is there. But that's probably going to be more down in the story details. But I do really love that idea of secret knowledge, shared knowledge. Anyway, that's what I got going down. That's my overview, Jefferson, of Touch. I don't know if you should share it with your friends to get their feedback. If we're going to rip it up and make it pretty different here shortly, but who knows? Maybe we won't. Leave it to you. Thanks for tuning in to Bootstrap Cinema, where I don't know what I'm doing, but I've been doing it for about a year now, and it's a lot of fun. And I think in another 9 or 10 years, I'll probably have a pretty sweet script put together, and that I can shop around and we'll get to watch this viral pandemic story and remember back in the good old days when we used to wear masks and social distance. Anyway, toodles.